Welcome to the Revenge Story Times channel. When Lisa first mentioned the wedding, it sounded like any other event she'd attended in the past. Her college friend Sarah was getting married in Charleston, South Carolina, and Lisa was excited to reunite with her old circle. It wasn't unusual for her to attend these types of events solo. My job and finances often kept me tethered to the city, and Lisa didn't mind traveling alone. In fact, she seemed to relish the independence. The invitation arrived in mid-June. It was elegant, the kind of ornate stationery that promised a grand event. Lisa spent days planning her outfit, texting back and forth with her friends about hairstyles and makeup ideas. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I supported her wholeheartedly, even offering to cover her travel costs since the wedding was out of state. She flew out on a Thursday evening, the wedding scheduled for Saturday. Before she left, I helped her load her suitcase into the car and kissed her goodbye. There was nothing unusual about that moment, no lingering doubts or feelings of foreboding. Our relationship wasn't perfect, we had our share of arguments like any couple. But I trusted her implicitly. The weekend passed uneventfully. Lisa sent me photos of the ceremony and reception, the bride looking radiant in her white gown, the groom grinning ear to ear. She even FaceTimed me briefly during the after-party, a little tipsy but cheerful. I smiled as she laughed with her friends in the background, the music blaring so loud I could barely hear her. When she returned home on Sunday night, she seemed exhausted, which I attributed to the whirlwind weekend. But there was a subtle difference in her demeanor. She was quieter than usual, avoiding prolonged eye contact. I chalked it up to fatigue and let it slide. A few days later, things started to feel off. Lisa seemed preoccupied, glued to her phone more often than usual. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off, saying she was catching up with work emails. I didn't think much of it at the time. Then came the sickness. It started with mild flu-like symptoms, fever, fatigue, and general discomfort. Lisa assumed it was a bug she'd picked up during her travels and took a few days off work to recover. But when the symptoms persisted, I urged her to see a doctor. Reluctantly, she agreed. Looking back, I realize now that her hesitation should have raised a red flag. At the time, though, I was more concerned for her health than anything else. She booked an appointment with her primary care physician, and I assumed it would be a routine checkup with a quick resolution. When she returned from the doctor's office, her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she clutched a prescription bag. She avoided my questions, insisting she was fine and that the doctor had prescribed antibiotics for a minor infection. I pressed her for details, but she snapped, accusing me of being overbearing. It wasn't like her to lash out like that, but I backed off, giving her space to recover. Still, a seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. Something wasn't adding up, and my instincts told me there was more to the story. That week, I noticed Lisa's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. She was guarded with her phone, taking calls in another room and deleting messages the moment they came through. She started going to bed earlier, claiming she was too tired to stay up and talk. It was as if a wall had suddenly appeared between us, one I couldn't seem to break through. I told myself it was just the stress of her illness, that she needed time to get back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong, not yet. The days following Lisa's doctor's visit felt like a slow unraveling. Her mood swings, her irritability, and her secretive behavior all added up to a tension in the house that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the sickness, it was something deeper. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. It came to a head one evening when I found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She didn't even notice me walk into the room. In her lap was her phone, unlocked, with a series of messages open. She quickly locked the screen when she saw me, fumbling awkwardly. "What's going on, Lisa?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Nothing," she replied too quickly. "Just texting Sarah, wedding stuff." Her tone was defensive, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. I didn't press further at that moment, but my suspicions deepened. A few days later, Lisa finally admitted she was still feeling unwell. She complained about persistent pain and reluctantly agreed to go back to the doctor. This time, she didn't return home with the same vague excuses. Instead, she walked through the door looking like she had seen a ghost. "What did the doctor say?" I asked. She hesitated, then dropped the bombshell: "I tested positive for an STD." The words hung in the air like a grenade waiting to explode. My mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. This wasn't the kind of thing that just happened out of nowhere. My immediate thought was that there had to be some mistake, but the look on her face told me otherwise. "What do you mean, an STD?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay composed. "How is that even possible?" Lisa stammered, her face flushed. "I don't know. The doctor said it could have been dormant or something." "Dormant?" I interrupted, incredulous. "Lisa, we've been married for 8 years. If this was something you had before, it would have shown up by now." She had no answer, just a feeble shrug as she avoided my gaze. That's when it hit me: there was only one plausible explanation. My wife had been unfaithful. The rest of the night was a blur of accusations and denials. Lisa tried to deflect, claiming there must have been some kind of mistake, but her defenses were weak, her excuses riddled with holes. I demanded to know what had happened at the wedding, but she insisted nothing inappropriate had occurred. "I swear I didn't do anything," she pleaded. "You have to believe me." But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. The following morning, I decided I needed answers. Lisa had left for work, still insisting on her innocence, but I wasn't convinced. I spent the day going through everything I could find: her social media accounts, her email, her phone bill. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, no incriminating messages or suspicious contacts. Then I stumbled upon her deleted messages. Lisa wasn't as tech-savvy as she thought, and with a little effort, I managed to recover some of the texts. What I found made my blood run cold. There were messages to a man named Jeff, someone I didn't recognize. The conversations were flirtatious, with hints of something more. One particular message stood out: "I can't stop thinking about that night in Charleston." It was all the confirmation I needed. Lisa had cheated on me, and she had done it during the wedding weekend. I confronted her that evening, armed with the evidence. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I showed her the messages, her face crumbled. She broke down, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. "It was a mistake," she cried. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was drunk, and he came on to me." Her excuses only fueled my anger. Drunk or not, she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had built my life with, had slept with another man, and brought back an STD as a souvenir. "I don't care what your excuses are," I said coldly. "You destroyed this marriage the moment you decided to betray me." Her sobs filled the room, but I was unmoved. My decision was made. This wasn't something I could forgive, and it certainly wasn't something I could forget. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bear to be near her, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a physical burden. I knew our marriage was over, but the question remained: how was I going to make her pay for what she had done? The next morning, I woke up in the guest room with a singular purpose: to uncover the full truth about Lisa's betrayal. Her half-hearted apologies and drunken excuses weren't enough. I needed the facts, not just for my peace of mind, but to ensure I could navigate the inevitable divorce on my terms. Lisa had left early for work, avoiding eye contact as she hurried out the door. That gave me the entire day to dig deeper. I started by revisiting her phone records. Her number was listed on our shared account, and I could easily access the call and text logs through the provider's website. That's when I noticed something odd. During the weekend of the wedding, there had been dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. The frequency was suspicious, and the timing, late at night, around the same time as the wedding afterparty, raised even more red flags. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, which struck me as deliberate. Using an online reverse phone lookup tool, I traced the number back to someone named Jeff Harper. The name matched the one I had seen in the recovered text messages. I felt a surge of vindication. This was the man Lisa had been involved with. Next, I checked her social media. Lisa had always been careful about what she posted, but her friends weren't as discreet. Scrolling through tagged photos from the wedding weekend, I found a picture of Lisa standing next to a tall, well-dressed man at the reception. The caption read, "Sarah's big day. Such a fun weekend with old friends and new ones. #wedding vibes." The man's face was unfamiliar, but his name was tagged in the post, Jeff Harper. Now that I had a name and a face, I decided to dig further. A quick search revealed that Jeff lived in Charleston and worked as a realtor. His social media profiles were mostly public, and they painted a picture of someone who lived for attention, lots of selfies, expensive cars, and photos from wild parties. He looked like exactly the kind of person who wouldn't hesitate to pursue a married woman. I wasn't going to let this slide. My next step was to gather more direct evidence. I called Lisa's closest friend, Megan, under the pretense of checking in about Lisa's health. Megan had also attended the wedding, and I figured she might know something. After a bit of small talk, I casually asked, "Did Lisa seem okay during the wedding? She's been acting really off since she got back." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, she did seem distracted," Megan said cautiously. "I mean, we all noticed she spent a lot of time with that Jeff guy. They were dancing together a lot at the reception." "Dancing?" I repeated, figuring surprise. "Yeah?" Megan continued, "It wasn't a big deal or anything. They just seemed to hit it off." Her tone suggested she didn't know the full extent of what had happened. Still, her comments confirmed my suspicions. Lisa hadn't just made a drunken mistake, she had actively engaged with this man, and her behavior had been noticeable enough for others to comment on it. By the end of the day, I had all the proof I needed: the recovered messages, the phone records, the photos, and Megan's remarks. Lisa had lied to me, betrayed me, and tried to cover it up. But now, the tables had turned, I was the one holding all the cards. That evening, I confronted her again. This time, I was calm and methodical, presenting each piece of evidence like a prosecutor in court. "You've been lying to me from the start," I said, laying her phone records on the table. "You spent the entire wedding weekend texting and calling Jeff Harper. And don't even try to deny it. I know who he is." Lisa's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. "I also know you were dancing with him all night," I continued, throwing Megan's comments into the mix. And judging by these messages, it didn't stop there. She burst into tears, pleading with me to listen. "It wasn't what you think," she sobbed. "I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You cheated on me, Lisa. You slept with another man, and now you want me to believe it was meaningless?" Her silence was answer enough. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the guest room, planning my next move. Divorce was inevitable, but I wanted to ensure I walked away with everything I deserved. I wasn't just going to let her walk away unscathed. She had made a mockery of our marriage, and now she was going to face the consequences. Tomorrow, I would call a lawyer. But that was only the beginning. Lisa thought her betrayal would stay buried, but I was going to make sure it saw the light of day. The morning after our confrontation, I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. My priority was to ensure that Lisa's infidelity wouldn't just dissolve our marriage, it would also leave her facing the consequences of her actions. As much as I was hurt, I was determined to approach this strategically, not emotionally. I had too much to lose to let my anger dictate my decisions. The attorney, Mr. Nolan, was a sharp, no-nonsense professional who specialized in high-conflict divorces. I laid everything out for him: the evidence of Lisa's infidelity, her STD diagnosis, the text messages, and the phone records. "Infidelity can work in your favor," he said, reviewing the materials. "Especially if we can prove it impacted your emotional or financial well-being. The more documentation we have, the better position you'll be in during the settlement. He advised me to gather financial records and any evidence of Lisa's recent spending. If she had used marital funds to facilitate her affair, paying for hotel rooms, dinners, or even flights, it could strengthen my case. I spent the next few days combing through our bank statements, credit card bills, and shared accounts. It didn't take long to find suspicious transactions. During the weekend of the wedding, there were charges to a luxury hotel in Charleston that didn't match the venue where Lisa stayed with her friends. The date aligned perfectly with the time frame of her infidelity. There were also charges for late-night rideshare services, expensive meals, and even a spa visit, all of which seemed out of character for someone attending a friend's wedding on a budget. Armed with this evidence, I met with Mr. Nolan again. He was impressed with my thoroughness. "We can use this to argue financial misconduct," he said. "It's not just about the affair, it's about how our actions violated the terms of your partnership. This will give us leverage in the settlement." While the legal wheels were set in motion, I began emotionally distancing myself from Lisa. I stayed in the guest room and communicated with her only when necessary. Lisa, sensing the inevitability of our separation, alternated between begging for forgiveness and lashing out in anger. Her desperation only solidified my resolve. I wasn't content with just a clean break. Lisa had humiliated me, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. Quietly, I started reaching out to people in our social circle. I didn't spread rumors or embellish the story. I simply shared the facts. "Lisa and I are divorcing," I told them. When they asked why, I added, "She cheated on me during Sarah's wedding weekend, and I have the evidence to prove it." Reactions varied. Some friends were shocked and supportive, offering to help in any way they could. Others, particularly those closer to Lisa, seemed hesitant to take sides. Regardless, the truth was out, and Lisa's reputation began to suffer. One of the most pivotal moments came when I contacted Sarah, the bride. I had debated whether to involve her, but I felt she had a right to know that her wedding had been the setting for Lisa's betrayal. Sarah was horrified when I explained what had happened. "She spent the whole weekend talking about how much she missed you," Sarah said, clearly appalled. "I can't believe she would do something like this." Sarah confirmed that Lisa and Jeff had spent an unusual amount of time together during the wedding, often disappearing for long stretches. She also revealed that Jeff had a reputation for pursuing married women, a detail that only made my blood boil. By the time our conversation ended, Sarah promised she would no longer tolerate Lisa's behavior and hinted that their friendship might not survive the fallout. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Mr. Nolan filed the divorce papers, citing infidelity as the primary cause. Lisa was served at her workplace, a calculated move that ensured maximum embarrassment. When she came home that evening, she was livid. "How could you humiliate me like that?" she yelled, waving the papers in my face. "I'm not the one who humiliated you," I replied coldly. "You did that to yourself the moment you decided to betray me." Lisa's outrage quickly turned to desperation. She begged me to reconsider, promising to change and insisting that we could work things out. But her words rang hollow. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Behind the scenes, I made sure to protect my assets. Mr. Nolan advised me to move half of our joint savings into a separate account, ensuring Lisa couldn't drain it in retaliation. I also changed the passwords on all our financial accounts and began documenting every interaction with her, just in case she tried to twist the narrative. By the time we reached the first court hearing, I was confident I had the upper hand. The judge reviewed the evidence of Lisa's infidelity and financial misconduct, and it was clear that her actions had jeopardized the integrity of our marriage. Mr. Nolan argued for a favorable division of assets, and the judge seemed inclined to agree. The divorce was far from finalized, but the groundwork had been laid. Lisa's betrayal had cost her more than just our relationship. It had tarnished her reputation, strained her friendships, and put her in a precarious financial position. I wasn't done yet, but I knew one thing for sure: she was starting to pay for what she had done. With the divorce process in motion and Lisa's betrayal exposed to those closest to us, I decided it wasn't enough. She had humiliated me, shattered our marriage, and violated the trust we had built over 8 years. I wanted her to face the full weight of her actions, not just legally, but socially and emotionally. I began with our shared social circle. Carefully and methodically, I reached out to mutual friends and family members. My tone was measured. I wasn't looking to turn people against her through anger or bitterness. Instead, I let the facts speak for themselves. I wanted you to hear it from me, I would say. Lisa and I are divorcing because she was unfaithful. I have evidence, and I'm pursuing a fair settlement. I showed them the text messages, the financial records, and the timeline of her infidelity. It was uncomfortable, but it ensured that my version of events was the first one they heard. Slowly but surely, the narrative shifted in my favor. Friends who had initially been sympathetic to Lisa began distancing themselves from her. The next step was more calculated. I discovered that Lisa's workplace had a strict ethics policy regarding personal conduct that could reflect poorly on the company. Knowing she held a leadership position in her department, I anonymously mailed the HR department copies of her hotel receipts and incriminating texts, highlighting the dates to coincide with her work travel. I didn't fabricate anything. I simply let the facts speak for themselves. Within a week, Lisa came home in tears, announcing she had been demoted for conduct unbecoming. It was a small victory, but it reinforced my resolve. I couldn't ignore Jeff Harper's role in all of this. His brazen pursuit of a married woman infuriated me, and I wanted him to understand the damage he had caused. I found his office address, he worked as a realtor, and decided to pay him a visit. Dressed in a suit and carrying a folder of evidence, I walked into his office one afternoon, startling him as he chatted with a client. I waited until they left before approaching him. "You don't know me," I said, placing the folder on his desk. "But you know my wife." Jeff's face went pale as he opened the folder and saw the printed messages and photos. He stammered, trying to deny everything, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to fight," I said coldly. "I just want you to know that your actions have consequences. You wreck a marriage, and I have no problem letting everyone know what kind of man you are." Before leaving, I made sure to casually mention that his clients might not appreciate his personal conduct. It was a calculated move, one that planted the seed of fear without crossing into outright threats. The tipping point came during a family gathering. Lisa's parents had always been supportive of our marriage, and I knew they were struggling to understand why we were divorcing. Lisa had tried to spin the narrative in her favor, claiming we had grown apart, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. When the topic of our divorce inevitably came up, I calmly laid out the truth. I explained how Lisa had cheated, how she had contracted an STD, and how she had lied to cover it up. The room fell silent as I presented the evidence. Lisa's parents looked horrified, while Lisa herself dissolved into tears. "You've embarrassed all of us, Lisa," her mother said quietly. "How could you do this?" It was a devastating moment for her, but it was one she had brought on herself. For me, it was a final vindication, proof that the people who mattered most knew the truth. As the divorce proceedings continued, my preparation paid off. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me a larger share of our assets and ensuring Lisa bore the brunt of the financial fallout. She was ordered to pay back half of the joint funds she had spent on her affair, leaving her in significant debt. Lisa moved out of our house shortly after the ruling. I watched her pack her belongings with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. She looked tired and defeated, a shadow of the confident woman I had once loved. "This is what happens when you betray someone," I said as she walked out the door. She didn't respond. With Lisa out of my life, I felt a sense of closure. She had faced the consequences of her actions, socially, professionally, and financially, and I had emerged stronger. The process had been grueling, but it had taught me the importance of resilience and the value of standing up for myself. For the first time in months, I felt free. My life was mine again, and I was determined to rebuild it on my own terms. Lisa's betrayal had been devastating, but it didn't define me. What defined me was how I chose to rise above it, and rise I did. With Lisa finally out of my life, I was left to rebuild, not just my home, but my sense of self. The process of moving on was slow, deliberate, and at times painful. But with each step, I felt a weight lifting. The echoes of betrayal began to fade, replaced by a renewed focus on my future. The first thing I did was reclaim the house. For years, it had been a symbol of our marriage, filled with memories of both joy and sorrow. Now, it was just mine. I began by purging everything that reminded me of Lisa, her clothes, her decorations, her photos. All of it went into boxes. Some I donated, others I threw out. It was cathartic, like exorcising a ghost. I redecorated, choosing furniture and artwork that suited my taste. The sterile, magazine-perfect vibe Lisa had favored was replaced by a warmer, more personal aesthetic. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was my home. During the marriage, Lisa and I had shared a lot of mutual friends. After the divorce, I made a conscious effort to reconnect with those who had supported me through the ordeal. I invited them over for dinners, went out for drinks, and rekindled bonds that had been neglected over the years. At the same time, I distanced myself from those who had sided with Lisa or tried to stay neutral. I didn't have room in my life for people who couldn't acknowledge the harm she had caused. This new circle of friends became my anchor, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Work had always been a stabilizing force for me, and I threw myself into it with renewed energy. I took on new projects, volunteered for leadership roles, and even started mentoring junior colleagues. My dedication paid off, and within a few months, I received a promotion. Outside of work, I rediscovered hobbies I had abandoned during my marriage. I started hiking again, exploring the trails I had loved in my 20s. I joined a local cycling club, where I met like-minded people who shared my passion for the outdoors. These activities not only filled my time but also reminded me of the joys of living in the moment. It was almost a year after the divorce when I felt ready to date again. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of trusting someone after what Lisa had done felt daunting. But I knew I couldn't let her betrayal define my future relationships. I signed up for a dating app and took things slow. After a few casual dates, I met Emily. She was kind, intelligent, and genuine, qualities that felt like a balm after the deception I had endured. Unlike Lisa, she valued honesty and made me feel secure in ways I hadn't realized I needed. We started seeing each other regularly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Emily didn't just represent a fresh start, she reminded me that not everyone would betray my trust. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized how much I had grown. Lisa's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a wake-up call. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself and our marriage. I had been too trusting, too willing to overlook red flags. Now, I was more discerning, more cautious, but not bitter. I had learned to value my own worth, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my happiness. Lisa's actions no longer defined me. They were simply a chapter in a much larger story. One evening, as I sat on my newly decorated patio watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace. The anger, the pain, and the resentment were gone, replaced by gratitude for the lessons I had learned in the life I was building. Lisa's choices had nearly destroyed me, but I had come out stronger. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future. And as I sipped my drink with Emily's laughter echoing from inside the house, I realized something important: revenge wasn't the point, moving on was. And I had done it. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button. It only takes a second but means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Something brand new is dropping tomorrow, so hit the notification bell to be among the first to see it. See you in the next video. Goodbye.